I have 7 o'clock. How are you, everyone? Thank you so much, Miss Jean. Thank you, Mr. James, for being here. We are recording our first session. And let me share my screen. So I just want to say Happy New Year. Good to see you all. I hope you had a great holiday time. We have Christmas and then we have New Year, but I'm so thankful to see you all once again. And I know for some of us, we've been under the weather battling. I don't know what I had. I don't know if it was the flu or some other kind of virus or whatever, but we're grateful that we're getting better. Miss Jean, you're getting better, taking it day by day. You've been doing okay, Mr. James?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yes. The germs are going around. But we're so thankful. We're in our own little homes. We're not going to spread any germs tonight. But so thankful to see you once again for one of my favorite classes. And this is a special class for you, Mr. James, because this is your last one, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it
So
is.
you're going to be our advocate. You go and tell everyone about your wonderful experience. So tonight, everyone, tonight's session is going to be based on, we're going to review the syllabus, ask any questions that you may have, because some of the other students may have the same questions too, and they weren't, able to join. And I will, for those people who are watching this, I'll record them, I'll record these sessions every week so that you can watch it at your leisure, because we know that folks are working and we got all kind of stuff going on. And once again, just as a reminder that the sessions are not mandatory. I totally understand that people are working and they have or other obligations going on at home. Excuse me, at home. But this is definitely an opportunity for you to jump on, ask questions, and we always have such a wonderful time reviewing the literature. I do see a typo. That should be spring 24. I can't remember. It's a new year. It is a whole new year. Are you getting used to writing 24 now? It still doesn't seem right. Yeah, I'm not used to the four there. I'm still used to a three. All right. So everybody, once you get into your class, I want you to do a couple of things. Most of you have gone and done week one, the introduction, but I just want to briefly go over the layout of our class in D2L. So you'll see on the left-hand side is our calendar. You'll see when we have class meetings or when something is open, when something is due. Okay, so nothing due this week more so other than your introductory form. That is so mandatory. So for anybody who is watching and you didn't do that introduction form, we have to make sure that we let the school know that you're here and you are participating. But if not, if you don't do that introduction form, it means that you're not present and you can get dropped from the course. So please, for those people who are watching, if you haven't done week one introduction form, make sure you do that. Okay. In the middle, you will find the modules for each week. And I try to label them by the start of the week so you know what week one is. We are, can you believe just how even January is moving through? So we are in week one, okay? Week of the 8th. So we just started on Monday. Actually, I want to go right up here to the syllabus tab. To the syllabus tab, if you click on, excuse me, syllabus and resources, you'll see that there are some documents that I have there for you. There's some MLA citation help if you're writing papers, as well as the syllabus. And we'll take a look at that in just a second. On the right-hand side of your of your class, you will see reminders or announcements, and I'll try to put a couple of announcements in there per week. So always make sure you check the announcement, see if I said anything new. All right. So let's go over our syllabus. I won't read everything. Let me see if I can click on this and see if it comes open. Okay. All right. Let me know if you are able to see this. Good. All right. And Miss Jean, you all right? Can you see it? Okay, let's see. Is she still here? Miss Jean? Okay. So I'll come back. Let me make sure that she's okay. All right. Just a couple of things I want to highlight here. Uh-oh. All right. Just a couple of things I want to highlight is your book. We have two books that we are going to need, and this is African American Worship, second edition. The author is Melva Costin, and I had the pleasure of meeting her. She's now gone on. She just passed in 2023. But I had, yes, I had an awesome opportunity to meet her, as well as we have a second book, Foundations of Christian Worship, and this is by Miss Susan White, Susan J. White. Now, you may also be saying, well, why do we have two books? Okay, two reasons is I wanted to, when we created this, I wanted you to get the basis of what Christian worship is, and we'll get the foundations of that from Miss White's book, Foundations of Christian Worship. And then in the second part of this, we've got to make sure, well, to me, I thought it would just be really good for us to make sure that we also understand African American worship and where it comes from and the trends and certain things that were done and where those things came from. Okay. So that's the reason why I selected two, and they are really good books. Okay. Um, you will see me along the semester. I will post any type of dates. If anything is coming up, like midterm, our first date that we need to pay attention to is, can you believe it? Monday, I'm looking at my calendar here. Monday is the King holiday. So we are off on Monday, the 15th. So we're going to start our week next week on the 16th, Tuesday. Okay. So we'll start on the 16th Tuesday. All right. So real quick, let's talk a little bit about this particular course. What is it all about? And I want you to see, let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger. I can't see. So the purpose of this particular course is to give you a formation and so you can understand where Christian worship comes from, what its purpose is within the church, also take a history look back of some practices, like, for example, communion and baptism, that we can trace even back to New Testament church. Okay. And one of the other really cool things that we will share is like the belief and the theology behind Christian worship acts. So, for example, if something is done within a worship service, a wedding, those type of things, it always has some type of theology or some type of meaning behind it. It won't be just done just to be done, right? We will examine some components to Christian worship experience, such as the music that is used, things that are said, which could be liturgies, prayers, and rituals. And the last part I want you to see right here on our learning objectives is that we'll analyze, like we said, historical context of worship, like where did it come from? A lot of things are changing, of course, especially due to COVID, as we saw over the last few years. How, oh my goodness, now, individuals don't have to enter into the building and they're able to watch or stream on YouTube or Facebook Live or something like that. But anyway, that also brings us to the present day and to see how different impacts have changed worship as well. All right. So remember, of course, this is an online class. We don't have to meet in person. And let me just scroll through a few things. And we're going to talk about grading and some assignments. And then I'm going to be quiet. Let Let me get down here. All right, so let's talk about our class schedule. So we're in week 1, and we already talked about doing our introductory form. Please make sure you do that. This week, I want you to read chapter 1 in Susan White's book. I tried to Xerox a few copies of the pages, but make sure you stop at page 22 in Susan White's book. That's it. Don't read the other book just yet. We'll get to that one a little bit later. Excuse me. So it's reading chapter 1 in Susan White. Week 2 is going to focus on Susan White again. We'll talk a little bit more about instrumental music, and then you'll see that you have a discussion forum. I won't read everything, but you'll see that you have a discussion forum most weeks. Week 3, we'll talk a little bit more about the Lord's Supper, or what's also called the Eucharist. And we'll talk a little bit more about where that comes from, and we'll examine that from the New Testament. Week 4, we'll be in Susan White again. We'll talk a little bit more about rituals and sacraments. Okay, so for example, we'll talk about marriage, Christian marriage, and burial practices. We'll have a quiz that we, and I'm setting it up where we may have a guest speaker. I'm trying to get us a guest speaker. On week 5, we will examine inclusive language in Susan White's book. That always gets a big spark of debate. So I'll be excited to hear what you have to say. We'll talk about, there's an assignment that you'll have for week 5, a video summary. Week 2, I can't look. Week 6, we have quiz 2, and then we'll be in Costin's. Okay, so it moves so fast, doesn't it? And then in week 7, we'll be in Costin's book again. We're going to talk about African spirituality. We have a case study that week. Then it ends so fast. We have another quiz this week in week 8. We'll talk about the invisible institution, which is, I'll give you a little bit of that, which the invisible institution is what slaves used to worship. And when we talk about invisible, they weren't able to worship freely, right? They had to go into the woods or down by the water and things like that. And we'll talk a little bit about a ring shop, and I have a video there for you in week 8. And then your final will be a research paper on marriages and and your directions. Okay. All right, before I stop talking here, we're going to have our discussion. That's 20%. You'll have 3 reading quizzes. That's 20%. You'll have a video summary reflection assignment. You'll have a worship research paper, okay? And then you have your worship case study. And so the research paper will come at the end. That would be like your final, okay? Let me pause a little bit. I'm having a little technical difficulty. I got something spinning on my computer here. Let me come back and see because now I can't see. Now, oh, let me just pause. Any questions for me? Share my screen. Any questions?
Nothing so far from me.
Nothing so far? All right. And you just let me know, students who are watching this, you let me know if you have any questions. Please email me. Well, my number is there. I'm having some little issues, but let me know, students, if you can see my PowerPoint that says Christian worship, and you see some ladies raising their hand.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, awesome. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like this. I apologize that you're seeing all the stuff on the side, but it looks like my computer, it's like freezing up. I've got something spinning here, so I'm not going to mess with it. We're going to keep it going. All right. So let us examine our, now this is going to come from the first reading in Susan White's book. Okay. And what I'm going to do tonight is pull some bullets from there. Make sure that you do that reading that I have assigned for you. in week 1, okay? And this is what we're going to discuss tonight, all right? So we're going to talk about the foundations of Christian worship. So let's just pause. I know I've been talking for a lot. Let's just pause. What does it mean to study Christian worship? So you're in this Christian worship class. What do you think that means to study it?
For me, it means that I will, I guess, gain an insight as to how worship is carried out in different communities,
That's right.
churches. And we know that it is different in many churches. No one church is the same.
That's right.
And so that's, what I want to gather from that, from the class, is to gain a more broader insight on worship experiences.
Excellent. A broader insight. That's what we're going to do. Very good. Very good. When we talk about studying Christian worship, I like what you said, Miss Jean, is that, well, every church or every denomination, every group or whatever may not do it the same way. So let's just back up a little bit. Let's just back up and let's break down those two words, Christian worship. So let's just pause. What do we mean by worship? What is that?
No, Professor, I'm assuming, Mound, you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, you're
Yeah,
good.
the study of I guess part of what we're trying to do is understand the relationship between worship and being a Christian.
All
You know,
right.
yeah, and I guess, if we were philosophy and thinking, is it necessary, or is worshiping necessary to be a Christian?
All right. That's a
And
good question.
and if it is, how do you define worship? What is actually worshiping, and how? And as Ms. Jane, as the lady was saying, worship could mean different things to different people.
True.
And so understanding exactly what one means when they're saying I'm worshiping God, or is it necessary for me to be a Christian
Mm-hmm.
to worship? And I guess more, how do I worship?
That's good.
Hmm.
That's good. I like those questions. As you
Yes.
said, is it necessary? So we have the Christian. So the Christian, the person who has declared that in their life they want to follow Christ, right?
Right.
So we have that. And then we have worship. Worship, the focus is adoring, or the focus is God, okay? And giving attention and or adoration to God. And so
Yes.
here we have the Christian, and here we have an act, ACT, we have an act that worship is a verb, right? As well as very much as it is a noun, but worship is a thing that is done. It's an action that is done with the Christian in mind. So worship in the Christian context, right?
Yes.
Worship has to be done by a person that is, deemed that, hey, I'm going to follow my life this particular way. And so in the act of worship, where the focus is God, you're right. Worship can take on many different, what's the word? Many different ways, where somebody may say, well, I worship is taking care of my children, or worship is singing a song. Worship is going down to the homeless shelter and bringing some blankets. Worship. So here's the thing. In this context, in this particular class, we're taking it more so in the context of in a closed building in a worship setting. But I do like how you took it a step further. Watch this, where worship extends outside of the worship, outside of the building,
Right.
because the worship also lies within the person,
Yourself. Yeah.
within the Christian self. Yeah. So when they leave out or they go to the CVS and they're interacting with the cashier, that was worship. Or they went to the restaurant and they left a bigger tip because they saw that that person, that the waiter or the waitress needed a little something more. That was worship. I like that. Go ahead.
Because you said something interesting then also, and I hadn't thought about it like this, but that within the context of this class, we're
Sure.
actually talking about those activities that take place within the building,
Correct.
right? Because I was thinking if a person walks along and they're just communing with nature, then, if you would say, argue, okay, that I am worshiping God because God
Yeah.
created this nature, and I'm giving them the adoration and the attention by walking along, looking at the trees and the stars or the sun or whatever. But for this course, though, we're going to concentrate on those activities that take place within the quote unquote church building.
The worship setting. There you go.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Uh-huh. Although we know, so as we backing up, although we know worship transcends outside of the four walls, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Very good. That's a good foundation for us. That's right there. Foundation. So worship, while we're going to talk about those things that are done within a church setting, but it can be taken outside of the church setting at any time, all the time.
Right.
So here's the next thing I want you to think about. In worship, the things that remember we had those two words, Christian worship. So in a worship experience, and I'll use that word a lot, a worship experience. So it could be a song, it could be a dance, it could be a wedding. There's always theology that relates to the act. Okay. So, for example, we won't get into it too much tonight, but we'll talk about communion, which is also called the Eucharist. And so there's a theology behind that about what do we think about God? What do we think about Jesus? Why are we doing this? Because it is an act that serves as reverence or in remembrance of something,
Right.
because we believe that this particular act was true. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mhm. So with everything that you hear in a worship setting, let's say, for example, a song or a hymn, okay, the song or the hymn or whatever is going to have theology about what we think about God. Oh, my favorite hymn is How Great Thou Art.
Mhm.
Oh, my goodness.
That's
I'll
actually
lose
mine too.
it on here. I will just lose it. Why? Because of the words, the lyrics, should I say, not the words, but the lyrics will point to the theology of what we think of God, or what the songwriter coined of what do we think about God, that a creator, one who will redeem us. Okay. And so when you listen to songs in the worship experience, it always, well, it should, right? But it always points back to the biblical text and what we think of God. Um, just something real simple. What a mighty God we serve, right? That's a song we sing a lot at our church. What a mighty God we serve. Okay, well, the theology is what? What do we think about God in that song? What a mighty God we serve. What are we thinking about God in that song?
We're referencing him as to how powerful he is, and singing that song
Right.
gives the connotation of what you said. Um, what a mighty God we serve. And we know that he is a mighty God for the mere fact that we are in the worship setting,
Mhm.
and it kind of sets a tone for the word that would come
Mhm.
forth.
Good.
Um,
So the theology of that song says we believe that God is great, that the Creator has power, right?
right.
Um, so on and so forth.
He's the great I am.
Right. Right. So the essence of this course, what we're going to do throughout these 8 weeks or so, is explore the how. How do Christians worship?
Mhm.
Where do we get it from? Why
Mm.
do we do this? You see the lady in the picture?
Mm-hmm.
And if we saw her outside, if this was our neighbor or something, and we saw her clasping her hands, we assume that she's doing what?
In a prayer, like,
Yeah, and giving adoration to God.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because this has become a symbol
Mhm. Mhm.
of worship.
Mhm.
We have children or grandchildren, and we teach them how. Fold your hands. That we even teach them how to do it, right?
Yes.
Something like this. All right. Good. Let's see if this is working here. All right. Okay. My screen changed. I hope that everything is working better now. All right. My
Yes.
screen changed and it says worship as a mirror of heaven. You see that?
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Okay, super. All right, everybody. Let's go over to the picture on the right. And just so you can just tell me what do you see? We're just like zooming in, looking at this setting. What would you say that it is?
A church setting,
Okay. What
a, a,
tells you that
a,
it's the church setting?
a mega church set, a large church set.
Yes.
Yeah. I take my glasses off. It's large. Okay, come on. What tells us that it's a church? Could be a school.
Pre-pandemic.
Oh,
Looks like
pews.
they looks like they're singing and lifting their arms and just rejoicing and trying to get into the worship atmosphere.
Okay.
I would
So
guess that the
Good
praise team
question.
is up now.
looks like the praise team. And so Mr. James said, I think it's a church because they have pews.
Yeah.
See
So
right there?
that's a good point you just made. So how do I know this is not a rock concert?
Yeah,
Ooh,
there you go.
oh,
It could be.
all right.
It could be. But there's a but. There's certain things you're saying.
But
But something about this tells me
It's not a rock concert.
hmm,
I don't see them gyrating or,
Understand?
like you would do at a concert.
but it's a picture. We don't know what they were doing after the picture was taken. No, okay, look at the people. Keep looking at the people. How are they standing? What are they doing with their hands? Or
Well, I see clapping.
There's some standing
Yeah.
and
look like a few of them have their hands extended. This man right here, this little group.
Uh-huh.
and also looking at the lights. You know, the lighting kind of looks like church.
Hmm. So I guess we have to assume that they are participating in worship, singing, raising their hands.
Right.
Um, I don't see anyone dancing yet.
Hmm. Yep, they could, right?
They
It
could
could
be.
But we
be.
also
They
look
could
at their
be way
attire.
over there in the corner.
That's sort of how I dance.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah. To each his own. Okay, now.
that's,
That
Okay.
look that's the worship. That's the worship coming out. That's the worship.
Yes. Yes.
uh,
All right. So as we just looked at this example, yes, we can assume that this is a church. We came up with this by, it looks like it. They have pews. They look like they're in a posture of worship. They have their hands extended. The way they dress. See a few ladies in skirts and things like that. The men have on trousers.
Professor, I was just getting ready to say something about that. If if this if it were if we had a picture from 50 to 60 to 75 years ago, the dress would be much more of a tell sign
Yeah.
than dress now, because
Yeah.
50 years ago, 45, 25, probably 30 years ago, you wouldn't see anyone in church dressed like this.
Right.
That's right.
We
Yeah.
we wore our Sunday best to church,
Yes.
as the folk used to say when we were growing up. But you probably wouldn't see that much casual dress
No.
in church if we were to go back, and I know 50 years ago.
Right. You definitely wouldn't see it, would you?
Especially Pentecostal, you would see hats and
Oh,
suits.
pretty hat.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
A Baptist.
Exactly.
Pretty
Yeah.
big hat.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. So as we look at this, it says worship as is going to be a mirror of heaven. Oh, just think about that.
Mm.
So the Orthodox and the Eastern Rite religions believe that worship is mirroring heavenly worship. And from if you also look in New Testament, Book of Revelation, talking about even how the angels will worship at that chosen time. Even in Old Testament, talking about the seraphims worshiping God.
Right.
Okay, so when one look at this part right here, second bullet, when one enters Christian worship, it's as if that person enters into another dimension or space. Let's pause right.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean that we jumped on a spaceship and we went to Mars. We're not saying that, are we?
No.
What you think Susan White means? One enters Christian worship. So if we walked into this setting or any other Christian worship setting, it says that the person should, ideally, right, enter another dimension or space.
Um, I guess you would enter into another level of experience
Mm-hmm.
as you are worshiping.
Mm-hmm.
And like you
Mm-hmm.
said, we're not going in a spaceship or anything. They're
Mm-hmm.
not going to zoom down and get us. But
No.
it's just that the different kind of experience that we would have in a Christian worship, in a church building, where others are gathered, and you are, you know, letting each other know that yes, we are experiencing something deeper than what we had when we came in.
Good, good. And so, from what I hear you saying, Miss Jean, is that through the act of worship, doing something, remember it's a verb, even though it's a
Mm-hmm.
noun, it's a verb, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if the Christian person says, "Well, hey, I'm going to participate," they are uh moved,
Mm-hmm.
and even that movement we talk about can also be within the mind. No, we're not flotating nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I want you all to go to the last 2 points. Somebody read those for me, please.
Worship helps in the human struggles of life. It is an oasis of peace and refreshment.
Mm. Hmm.
Okay. Worship helps in the human struggle.
Mm-hmm.
That's deep
Mm-hmm.
because if you believe that the reason why you are worshiping as a Christian is that you're trying to get through the everyday struggles of life
Right.
that we all have, but then there is something that we can rely on that will help us to make it to that next step, and that our struggles would be made a little bit easier
Uh-huh.
if we are a practicing, Christian.
Good.
Um, because
Good. So
we face it,
I'm sorry.
struggles are going to come in life
Yes.
every day, all day, and it's how we handle them. And if we can find a way to um, decipher through those struggles,
Mm-hmm.
then I think it's a wonderful thing.
Excellent. Excellent. So I want you to think about it like this: as we talk about, it says worship helps us in human struggles of life. All right. I want you to think back any worship experience you've been in.
Hmm.
What could happen? What could happen to an individual to help them through their whatever is going on? What happens? Or give me an example of what could happen that could lift up that person, uh, or maybe you have an example that happened to you that brought you a little bit more peace or brought you a little bit more clarity.
Before we answer that question, and I
Yes.
think, and even like as I think she talked about in the book, it could be a song, it could be a prayer.
There you go.
But before we look at that, something been puzzling me on the perspective in which she maybe wrote this book, and I'm wondering if it was from the perspective of what Christian worship experience should be, or did she write it more from, I would call, an empirical scientific study of what Christian worships are? And by that I mean, I'm wondering if she looked at uh, some type of a scientific study where she actually interviewed
Oh.
Christians, where she talked to them. She talked to people who experienced the worship experience, had the worship experience, and say, uh-huh. I did this empirical study and I did this research, and I found out that this is what uh, statistically higher you want to put. So
Mm-hmm.
this is the effect of
Mm-hmm.
the worship experience. Or if she wrote it from the perspective I'm almost going to say a preacher in the sense of what the Christian worship experience should be. It's just puzzling in my mind because I can see the good answers, the right answers, that if I walk into a church, I'm feeling down, and Why the Mighty God is singing, and the choir singing, and it lifts me up.
Yes.
But my wondering is if I were to take 10 people and walk into a service and What a Mighty God is playing, 10 people who said when I walked in, I was feeling down, how many of them were uplifted to the point when they left, they felt better about their situation?
Right.
Just thinking out loud.
Well, I can't really say. I'm looking at my bookshelf here. I can't really say if she did that or not. She is a academician, so I'm sure she came with it with theory, but I'm sure there's also practice. So not necessarily saying this is what it should be. The book is more so this is our observation of what it is. And also remember, she's going to also, excuse me, she's going to also go back and give that basis of how did worship also help New Testament church. So remember, as we saw the church begin to grow in the book of Acts, the things that kept them together were worship experiences because they were being persecuted. They gathered, you see in book of Corinthians, first and second Corinthians, we see them gathering in acts of worship, whether they were doing good stuff or bad stuff, but we do see that they're gathering in worship experiences at people's homes. Paul's establishing these churches, and so worship's going well for some folks, worship's not going well for some folks, and hence these epistles that all these letters he write, right? But I don't want to go too off. So anyway, White's book is more so this is what it is with a basis of this is where it came from scripture.
Okay.
That's a good observation.
This is interesting.
It's heavy.
Great observation. Y'all are ready. You're ready for PhD. All right. And look at this picture. Look at this picture. Worship as communion. I want you to observe this picture. I'm going to my bookshelf. Tell me what you see in this picture. Yeah. What do you see there? Every time when you go to look for it, you can't find it. Go ahead.
He's rejoicing. It looks like he was playing the guitar.
How you know he's rejoicing? He could have been stretching his
raising. I'm assuming that he is. He's raising his hands, and he's standing up there in front of those people. He's not telling them to sit down.
He
might be. That's enough.
I don't think.
But I understand but being a black man surrounded by a whole lot of white people with my hands up.
He is worshiping Mr. James. I know what you're saying. So it looks like we can all come to.
You think he's scared? You think he's scared?
You think he was scared?
Is he saying, "Hallelujah, help me"?
He was playing his guitar. But I want you to look at this. Look at this over here. Worship can also be communion. Worship as communion.
Mm.
Somebody read right here.
Worship.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
It's sort of contagious.
I like that. It is when you get in community. So think about the acts that are done in a worship experience. We sing, and even though you may have a soloist, most of the time it is congregational singing. Or even if there is a choir, we can sing along with the choir. We can clap along with the choir.
And I think you often see that sometimes a song, and you'll see one person stand and stop, and then next thing you know, people are jumping all over.
Community. There you go. There you go. So communion in the Greek is called koinonia. This K word right here, koinonia. You got a new word to tell your people. And what does that mean? Mm-hmm. So it means that we're sharing. We're participating together. We're fellowshipping together. We're singing together. We have life experiences together. So when we start talking about the African American experience that was born from our African ancestors, when they met in invisible places, and we say invisible places because they didn't want the master to see them, right? Their whole point was we got to get together.
Mm.
Yes, they could worship by themselves, but they think about the power that came together.
Together, yeah. As a
Right.
community, yeah.
When they got in community.
Yeah.
Susan White says on page 6, she says that worship is intended for the inside. What do you think she means by that?
I like that comment. I thought that was interesting.
It is.
That right, that uh, you worship. You have to get to know God before you can worship God.
All right.
So if you're and this is the way I took outsiders. If you didn't know
Inside.
God, if you didn't know God, then you weren't able. You may be able to know about Him or but if you don't know God, you can't
Right.
worship God.
Right. Right. So that's what she means by the worship is intended for the insider. So it's hard for the person who doesn't know the creator God to worship God. And so it's not to say that they're totally out of it. No.
Yeah, they can know about it.
Oh, yes. But it
Oh, yeah.
still can be enjoyable for them. But the true worship part comes from relationship. Oh, because I know this person. You know. Now, here's the wonderful part is that the worship experience can draw an individual and pique their curiosity as well.
Mm-hmm.
What is this about?
Say, what are you doing?
What are you doing? Well, there was a line in this song that said such and such. What is that about? What does that mean?
Mm.
Mm-hmm. All right. Worship, she says, worship is intended for the insiders. All right. We're doing good tonight. Worship, she says, worship, we ought to see worship as proclamation, proclaim. And when we say proclaim, these are the things that we say. These are the
Yes.
verbal things that are said during a worship experience. So, for example, somebody go to the top and read that part right there where I have the use of liturgy.
Liturgy is a common synonym for public worship. It originated in two Greek words, loas, I think that is, meaning people, and ergon, meaning work. It is a ministry of the whole congregation and serves to be community as well.
Good. So liturgy are the things that are said, for example, like a responsive reading. Okay. Not necessarily meant to be said by yourself, but it's meant to be used by the whole congregation. So remember, when White says, what do we, if you see this later, what does she mean by worship as proclamation? Go right over here. This is what we declare by our voice.
Mhm.
So, for example, some churches may have creeds, they have made affirmations.
Right.
Anything that is said, anything that is said from the mouth, the preaching time, reading the scripture, testimony service. What else can we say with our mouth? That I say responsibly.
Now, I grew up in a small rural Baptist church. So there were certain people that used to shout. That's what we so while there was physical movement, but it was also mouth movement also.
That's right. That's very
Shout.
good. Yeah. And that shout was like a testimony.
Yes.
No, I know God will do it. God worked it out. That's testimony. That's proclamation. I'm telling you what I saw. I'm telling you what God did for me.
Me. What I
and
know.
God can do the same for you. Yeah. So that is anything. So when we see this again, worship as proclamation, those are the things that are said through voice. The preaching moment, that's proclamation. Because of course the preacher is using their voice. Gotta say it. All right. And then we get to worship as transcendence. Transcendence. What in the world is that?
Mm.
So Miss White says transcendence. Somebody read that first bullet, please.
Worship is an encounter with the transcendent God.
Mm-hmm. So transcendence. Did we get it right here? Transcendence. It
Mhm.
means of God,
Mhm.
existing apart from and not subject to the limitations, meaning that God is existing apart from and not subject to the material stuff of the world.
Yeah.
God is not in this, not concerned about this water bottle or the actual pew or whatever. So when we see that word transcendence, meaning apart from this material stuff, apart from the clothes we had on. Good. And so Mr. James lifted up the second one. Worship is an encounter with the transcendent God. Let's pause right there.
Worship is an encounter with the transcendent God. Well,
So
that's when you have that true relationship, like we said, that true relationship with God. Uh, to me, it's the same as an encounter with Him.
yeah,
Strengthens you.
So, this actually gets back to our earlier discussion when you enter the worship environment,
uh-huh,
you you go into a different space.
Hmm.
uh-huh,
And in this space, you have the transcendent God
Right.
uh-huh.
that you can have a encounter with.
Even though, let me add this one there too. Even though transcendent God was also in our house, was also in our car ride with
Oh
us,
yeah.
on the
Right.
bus with us. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
don't want, especially for people who are watching, like, oh, well, only on the in the church? No.
But we sort of established that for the discussion of this class, we were talking about that church building environment.
The worship setting environment.
Right. Worship setting, I should say. Worship
Sure.
setting environment.
Right. And so when the person comes in, look at the third bullet. 1, 2, 3. Start with humans. Somebody read that.
Mm-hmm.
Humans come into the presence of God with awe and respect.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, Mr. James, we're going back a couple slides. Like what we said is that when the Christian enters into this space, this sacred space, they're going into this it's almost like a different dimension, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So why? Because the presence of God is there. And what's the human's responsibility? The human responsibility is to come with a particular type of attitude.
Attitude, yeah. Respect for him. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Somebody go right down here. Prayer and singing. What do we say about that?
Prayer and singing can be ways to open up to the Spirit of God. Oh, most definitely.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. You can have a song in your heart, and even though the choir, praise team may be singing, you can still be in your own little space, humming and singing your song
Right.
because it has touched you. Um, Ways to open up, and that is a way to open up to the Spirit of God, and you're ushering him in, into
Music.
the space. Yeah.
Yes. So music, and we're going to talk more in this course about music and instruments and things. So not so much tonight, but the singing, excuse me, the singing and the music is so purposeful because it's meant to help the worshiper to open up.
Yep.
The prayer is done right, right? We all been
Yep. Oh yeah.
in a prayer service, right? But if the prayer done right, the prayer is meant to open us up and even help us have our own prayer ourselves, or maybe promote us. When I go home, I'm gonna pray some more, about XYZ. So I just want to pause right here. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever experienced that where the prayer time just changed the whole dynamic, or the song just changed the whole dynamic?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean, change the whole dynamic of the prayer, of the worship?
Of the worship setting.
Yes. Oh, most definitely. Yeah. Especially when everyone is being involved, and it's like a catch-22. This person next to you catches on, the person next to them catches on, and it's just, evolving the whole time. And
Yeah.
when we all get together and sing our songs and open up to the Spirit of God, it welcomes him in.
It does. It really does. It welcomes the creator God in. I'm going to do this before we leave out tonight. We're going to look at Amos chapter 5, verses 21 through 24. We're going to go to that in just 1 second. And we're going to take a look at, let me pull this up while we're talking. We're going to go to Amos chapter 5. I'll pull it up so we can see it on the screen.
Yeah.
And you all stay right there. I'm coming right back. We're going to go to Amos chapter 5. And we're going to, I think that was verse 21.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm coming back to you. And I'm going to share it. Okay, so we're going to read these 3 verses. And we're going to examine, I had some questions there for you, but we're going to examine how the Lord feels about their worship. We're going to go 21 to 20.
Yeah.
Mr. James, you want to read that for us?
Yeah, it just say, okay, I would say, I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies, even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I would not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals, I will not look upon them. I would not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to melodies of harps. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. So it appears that in this particular setting, they were going through the motions of worship,
Yeah.
but their hearts weren't in it. The term I guess we use sometimes today, we call it play church. So it appears that this was in this particular case, it wasn't true worship in the sense that they weren't showing real adoration or attention to God, and much probably more to the process.
Good. Very good. Very good. And a lot. I'm going to change my screen in just a second, but to my students who are watching this, I want you to read Amos chapter 5, verses 21 through 24. So as we wrap up here, I do want you to see, let me go back to our lesson. I do want you to see that. So if we go back to the foundation, which is scripture, which is Bible, right? In the Old and New Testament, God had things to say about their worship. God had things to say about their worship, like, hey, your worship is way off, and you think that I'm the center of it, but you're making you the center of it. Like I said, in New Testament, we go down to Corinthian church. They were having communion and they were bringing in food and they were getting drunk and things like that. Yeah, yeah. They were just a mess. And so and so had food to eat, and this one didn't have no food to eat. And God, and well, at that time, Paul said, "This is ridiculous. We got to stop. This is community. This is not about snatching food out of somebody's mouth. That's not worship." So, as we end tonight, we saw how the Creator God felt about their worship, and that was Old Testament.
Wow.
That was Old Testament. So it's important for individuals, if they're in the worship experience, go right over here. Can somebody read that question? What should they ask themselves?
What is this service about?
Mm-hmm.
What is it saying about God?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So if in the service, and we're not picking on any particular church, we're just talking in general. If in there, if it's you're bad, or this group of people is bad, or this group is horrible, and oh my goodness, but okay, well, you just beat me down. What is that saying about God? So if you're saying that God didn't like the ladies, I'm just making up something, then the person is sitting there saying, well, is that true that God doesn't like women, or God doesn't love women? And so, no, and it's not. But if that service is focused that way, that person could get the wrong, what's the word? Connotation. So we see in the Old Testament and New Testament are going to be foundational for us to go back to say, how did they worship? Some of them got it right and some of them got it way wrong. But worship is the place where the Bible comes alive. But one of the key things that the Bible did is look at this last point. Somebody read this last point where the clock is.
The Bible challenges true worship. It questions false worship, such as worshiping people or idols.
There you go.
Wow.
So a lot in the Old Testament, God's like, listen, you worshiping these idols, you worshiping all of this. New Testament, it was more so worshiping the wrong people, focusing on individuals, and we can even draw that out to 2024.
Mhm.
For sure.
Yep, not focused on the right thing. So as we come from this lesson tonight, we have a good foundation of what worship is. We know that we can find it in Old and New Testament as our foundation, right? And we know that God has a lot to say about it, whether he liked it or did not like it, because the humans would sometimes get it wrong. And so as we get through chapter 1, remember, we talked about worship as community. Now I'm forgetting. Worship as community. I'm looking at my notes. Worship at the transcendent God. I know what it was. Worship as proclamation.
Proclamation.
There we go. I said worship as transcendence, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Worship as proclamation. Those are the words that we use. Worship as a mirror of heaven. That's what it was. Okay. Worship as a mirror of heaven. So if we see how biblical worship, heavenly worship is explained, angels worshiping the creator God, and then we come to earthly worship. Many times it's a lot of disparity. Okay. All right, good people. We're gonna pause right here. We did a wonderful job tonight kicking it off on our first week and starting in Miss Susan White's book. Any questions for me?
Not at this time.
So remember, nothing due this week. This is the first week. We're trying to make sure everybody's in. So for those folks who are watching, because you have already done this, those folks who are watching just got about 2 or 3 more people. You got to make sure that you do that introduction forum. If it's not done by Tuesday, then your name goes in and you're going to be dropped from the class. I don't want you dropped from the class. I want you to stay. Okay. All right. All right, everybody. I'm going to see you next Thursday. I'm not even going to call today because I'm going to get it messed up. 18? I'm
Yes,
looking
so.
down.
Yes, 18.
Yes.
Yeah, 18.
Wow.
Okay.
So we're going to be in February in a minute.